네, 안녕하세요. 2020 대한민국 농업 박람회의 미래와의 대화에 참여하게 되어 반갑습니다. 저는 오늘 1시간가량 대담 프로그램인 미래와의 대화에서 모더레이터를 맡게 된 키스트의 노주원 단장입니다. 요즘 우리는 이전과 아주 다른 상황 속에서 살고 있습니다. 사실 1월 코로나가 대한민국에 처음 발생했을 때만 해도 이렇게 어려움이 전 세계적으로 확산되고 사회 경제적으로 영향을 미칠 거라고는 생각하지 못했습니다. 그리고 지금 약 8개월이 넘은 현재 이제 앞으로 코로나 이후 우리의 삶이 어떻게 바뀔 것인가에 대해서 준비를 해야 되는 시점이기도 합니다. 참 어려운 이야기이기도 한데요. 오늘은 미래학자이자 경제학자이신 제이슨 쉔커를 모시고 약 25분 동안 코로나 이후의 세계와 농업에 대한 이야기를 들어보고자 합니다. 그리고 오늘 이 자리에 또 한 분을 모셨습니다. 오늘 제 옆에 패널로는 고려대학교 사회학과 김철규 교수님을 모셨는데요. 김철규 교수님은 미국 코넬 대학에서 박사를 받으시고 한국 사회, 특히 농촌 사회에 대한 많은 연구를 해오셨으며 한국 농촌 사회학회장을 역임하셨습니다. 교수님 반갑습니다.
네, 반갑습니다. 이 귀한 자리에 뵙게 돼서 대단히 기쁩니다. 반갑습니다.
네, 그럼 오늘 강연부터 시작하겠습니다. 오늘 연사로 모시는 제이슨 쉔커는 세계에서 가장 정확한 금융 예측가이자 미래학자 중 한 사람으로 평가받고 있으며 블룸버그가 선정한 세계 최고의 미래학자로 프레스 이코노믹을 설립하고 퓨처리스트 인스티튜트의 의장을 맡고 있으면서 경제 등 다양한 이슈와 관련해서 미 정부에 자문을 하고 있습니다. 미래와 관련된 저서로는 국내에도 번역된 바가 있는 코로나 이후의 세계, 애프터샥 이러한 것들이 있고요. 어제 바로 출간이 된 The Future of Food and Agriculture After COVID 이러한 저서가 출간이 됐는데 이것은 곧 한국 독자분들과도 만나볼 수 있다고 말씀을 하십니다. 제이슨 쉔커 화면에 나오셨네요. Good morning, Mr. Schenker. It's nice to see you. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Dr. No. It is my honor and pleasure to be here at the Korea Agriculture Show 2020. Thank you.
네, 그럼 지금부터 제이슨 쉔커 의장께서 전하는 코로나 이후의 세계, 우리 사회의 변화에 대한 이야기를 함께 들어보도록 하겠습니다. Mr. Schenker, now I would like to invite you to the audience who are ready to listen your insight of the future. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. No. After COVID, there will be many changes, and some of them will be good and will cast long shadows into the future. We've seen in many different ways how the COVID-19 experience has cast light on things we had taken for granted. Things like food and agriculture. Many people had come to just assume it would be fine and it wasn't a concern. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, economic shutdown and recession, concerns about food supplies, food supply chains, and the like became significant concerns. But there are reasons to be optimistic about the future after COVID, especially as we look out 10, 20, or 30 years. More people have access to education because of a big leap forward in online education. And more educated people will have greater earning opportunities, and it will be positive for society. We're also likely to see big leaps forward in remote working, where people who had not previously considered remote working will now have that chance, and that could improve their lives. And we're likely to see many other things change. One of those is the focus on food and agriculture as a core, fundamental part of our economy, something that for many people had become forgotten. In the short term, the most important dynamic is to understand the bifurcation of outlooks for countries that are emerging markets and countries that are the most advanced economies. Emerging and developing economies are recovering more quickly, and advanced economies more slowly. The reason? Developing and emerging markets have more manufacturing and agriculture as a percent of their economy. As we look at advanced economies, they have much bigger service sectors. And the COVID-19 shutdown and recession really hurt the service sector much more then manufacturing, which remained truly critical, and we've seen increases in demand for, and agriculture, which saw a surge in demand as well as prices in some areas. As we look at the underlying data, we see that manufacturing, these are purchasing manager indices. This survey data shows that there was a contraction and it was steep, but that manufacturing globally is already expanding again. This data looks at manufacturing, for example, in the US, China, and Europe. About 60% of the world's manufacturing has already well seen bottom and is already recovering and growing again. This is likely to be true across all economies where we see manufacturing and the demand for goods becomes more critical and is very strong. Something else to consider too, as we think about agriculture as an industry and all industries, is what's happened to interest rates, to the cost of money. In the United States, we've seen interest rates pushed towards zero. In the Eurozone, they have had negative deposit rates since 2014. And in Korea, we've seen the interest rates pushed quite low in recent years as well. Money is quite cheap. This means, how do you get growth going forward? There's a model of economic growth called the Solow growth model. And it shows that growth is a function of three things: technology, labor, and capital. We know that right now, the ability to lower interest rates further from the current levels to boost economic growth with monetary policy will be quite difficult. And technology will become an ever increasing lever of economic growth. Furthermore, we also know that there are some broader systemic risks in the global economy. For example, the cost of everything in terms of the impact of COVID-19 has been significant. Central banks have increased their balance sheets, like the Fed here, and we've also seen many countries increase their debt. This is the US debt, for example. It took 205 years for the US national debt to hit $1 trillion, but in the second quarter of this year, $1 trillion was added to the debt every single month. There have been these big impacts that will carry forward. Other impacts we need to be aware of are that this has occurred globally and that issues of debt will occur globally. And that right now, on a global basis, we see that debt is right now very close to where it was at the peak at the end of World War II in advanced economies, and in emerging markets as a percent debt to GDP ratio, it's at an all-time high. And it's very likely that for both advanced economies and emerging markets, we will be at all-time highs if we're not already very, very soon. In terms of the disruption in the labor market, in many economies, we've seen lots of different losses of jobs across sectors. In the United States, where we still are very much fighting COVID-19, we see that the number of people who've lost their jobs is actually greater than the number of people who were in the labor market during the Great Depression, which many people talk about. Even right now, as I speak to you, the number of people who are unemployed still exceeds the number of unemployed people in the worst year of the Great Depression. But that's not the only thing that's happening in the labor market in terms of disruption. And what's really important for agriculture is, against the backdrop of the losses that we're seeing, is also a push towards technological leverage. Online education, remote working environments, and the use of technology wherever you can. In areas, for example, of telecommuting, this was a trend that was already there. Between 2005 and 2015, telecommuters increased by 115%, much more than any other kind of way that people went to work. This trend now has really hit a new level, and many people who are working remotely because of COVID-19 may never go back to offices. From an environmental impact standpoint, having fewer people commute is positive. From an energy use standpoint, it's also positive. People don't necessarily see a value add by sitting in traffic for hours. And if they don't have to do that, they save time, They reduce their fuel consumption. They reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. There are many positive benefits of more people working remotely. The trend was already there, was this where this was growing. And now we have seen a significant digital transformation across the economy, many of which will not see a rollback of. If we also consider what's happened with e-commerce, globally, the trend has been rising. Some of the most recent data out of the United States shows a massive shift up in e-commerce as a percent of the retailers where retail sales are made. This jump is something that was always possible, but COVID-19 forced us into digital transformation, made us go not only from a world of working in an office to remote work, but now of remote commerce. This was already a potential. This was already growing. But now we see there will be no going back. E-commerce will become ever more critical for supply chains, for the economy. And the reason is convenience. These things will continue as trends. In labor markets, we've seen, and there's two graphs here on the left, this is in the United States, the people working in department stores. You'll see this data series was discontinued a few years ago. They didn't want to collect the data anymore. It's been abysmal. But on the right, you see the people working in warehousing and storage. And even though the graph on the left is bad, more jobs were created in the warehousing and storage area, and those jobs paid better. In fact, the worst paying job in the graph on the right paid more than the best jobs on the left. So this is really important because people sometimes are concerned about what futurists call a robocalypse, where technology hurts all the jobs and all the jobs become low paying and this sort of thing. And that's not what we're seeing here. What we're seeing is because of the technology, we have something new. E-commerce that didn't exist before now has gone up a lot. And because of that, it's created jobs. This was a thing that didn't exist. Because you have this new change, it creates new jobs. And because the new jobs have so much leverage of technology, they pay well. This is something we could see in agriculture as well. A trend that's been going on for a long time is the decline in the percent of population working in agriculture. In the United States, if we go back 160 years, the majority of people were working in the United States. But for many years, it's been quite low. Here you can see these numbers are all below 2% of the labor force, or around 2% of the labor force, depending on the year. These are pretty low numbers. Right now, that's about 1.3%. Korea is a little bit higher than that, but that's gone down over time as well, between 10 and 20% in the early 90s. And now much lower, closer to 5%. These are much smaller numbers. If we look at what's happened globally, we see that that number has also fallen, sort of from the mid 40% to just below 30%. So across economies, China and Vietnam, also other examples, as economies become more advanced, as they use more technology, what we see is the percent of people working in agriculture goes down. And a big piece of that is technological leverage. This is a trend that will continue across economies. I would expect that these dynamics will be very important going forward in the labor force, but also not just the absolute decline in the percent of the workforce working in agriculture, but that as this goes down, the output per worker will go up because of that technological leverage. But it's not just in crops and in agricultural area, raising livestock, where you're going to see implementation of more automation and technology in Korea, as well as in other countries. These are forecasts and some historical data for robot installations in food and beverage. We've already seen kioscification, the use of kiosks in many different food places. It's existing in the US, in Europe, in Asia. These areas are going to spread. We will see more of this. We will see this continue to grow. This is very likely to be very important for technological leverage across the downstream part of the food supply chain. Also, following COVID-19, and I know it's also a priority of the Korean New Deal, is the contactless aspect of automation and technology that's going to be adopted going forward. The use of robots or automated solutions in food delivery and e-commerce will become really important for making agriculture even safer for people to receive the goods of. So as we see the increase in security across that whole supply chain, that's going to continue to be a priority, especially in a post-COVID world. This will create opportunities, significant opportunities, for technology to secure the population as well as provide a technological lever. Now, as I think of the biggest dynamic that we should be considering when we think about agriculture, it's the fact that if we look at the global population between 2020 and 2050, there will be about 2 billion more people on the planet 30 years from now. Based on some calculations that we've done, not just because of the increase in population, but also because of an increase in wealth, it's possible by 2050 that globally we may need 44% more calories per day than the planet currently consumes from all of its global citizens. This is very important because as we look at per capita wealth, we see significant gains. Obviously, we've seen very significant gains in recent years in developed economies, economies like Korea and the United States. They're at very high levels now. But where we're seeing the next level up is really going to be in India, in China, and in really developing markets. I had a discussion recently with someone who was looking at investing in Africa and looking at the dollar levels. They said the dollars are low. And I had to point out that it doesn't necessarily matter what the level is now. It matters how much the percent changes will occur going forward. If you double or triple or quadruple, exponential impacts begin to matter. And that will be true as we think about emerging wealth, especially in emerging and developing Asia and Africa, as well as Latin America. So those are areas where we're going to see some of the greatest growth in wealth. And as we see not only more wealthy people, but more people, that dynamic will drive global calories. Now, yields have been going up across many economies. The United States has seen significantly higher yields than Korea or other economies, for example. This has to do with a very different kind of farming and a very different kind of agriculture. It's much more consolidated. You can see that in the labor numbers, for example, where really a handful of people in the United States produce all the food and agriculture, and that has to do with consolidation and capital formation. What we expect going forward is, in general, the yields you see here will also continue to rise. In Korea and globally, those yields will go up over time as more technology is adopted and implemented. That's true for the crop yields, but this will really be the challenge here, where we talk about this per capita daily calorie consumption number. So even though yields have been going up, because you have more people and more people making more money, this is that challenge. This is the number where if we see that global number of calories get closer to where the Korean daily calories are or the US daily calories, we're going to need a lot more global calories looking several decades out. It's just going to be very high demand. That means that food and agriculture in general, which many people kind of have taken for granted, now is under that spotlight after COVID-19, when people had not worried about food and now did, and they couldn't get food they wanted. Now we see the potential for it to become an even more critical global issue over the next 30 years. I would share an anecdote from the COVID-19 period. Around the time when our economic shutdown happened, what we found, I was on a conference call with a number of CEOs. And the folks on the phone controlled roughly about companies that make $70 billion a year in revenue, roughly. So these are very important CEOs, and they have a lot of influence, and the companies they control are big. And we were talking about the food problems, but it wasn't in the way we are talking about the food problems today. The topics were, hey, do you know a website I can go to get cheese delivered? Hey, where can I get fresh fish? Do you know of an app where I can order fruits and vegetables? And this were CEOs who control companies that make billions of dollars a year. And they were trying to figure out, where do they get food? And that really, for me, was a moment of clarity when you realize how big a risk everything was around the food supply chain and how much a national security risk that could have become for many places. And I think we're lucky that the wheels didn't fall off, as we say, and that societies kept going. But there was a real risk, and folks who had essentially unlimited access to money couldn't get cheese. So this is something we've never seen before. And it will impact what people think of as career decisions, how people think about risk for decades going forward. A couple months ago, I had a conversation with a company that invests in housing, in building homes. And they asked me what I thought some of the impacts would be. One of the things I said would be pantries. These are rooms next to the kitchen where you keep food. For years, people haven't had them. You don't need them. You just order the food and the food shows up and it's fine. After COVID-19, you will see a lot more people keep inventory at home as they have more food here. People will forever remember when they couldn't get food, and paper products as well, agricultural paper products, right? If you can't get toilet paper and napkins, paper towels, these things become memories that will impact how people think about buying goods for the rest of their lives. So even though we've seen that become a critical issue now, it's likely to become more critical in the future because of these fundamental global dynamics, right? There is a saying that demographics is destiny. And if this is true, and we're going to have more people and everyone's going to be richer, the demand for food and high quality food will be much greater. Additionally, one of those quality foods people will continue to really hunt for will be meat calories, so protein. You can see here the per capita daily meat calorie consumption numbers. The United States near some of the highest, but we've seen really big jumps in Vietnam and China in terms of their daily per capita meat calorie consumption. And a lot of this has to do with, I think, as a signal of wealth, that you're seeing emerging markets where meat was very scarce. Now you see meat takes on the accoutrement, the appearance of wealth. And so you're going to see the demand for meat calories here also rise significantly, potentially doubling between now and 2050. So that's going to be a significant dynamic that impacts agriculture at all levels, because as we produce more calories and we also need more meat calories, right? And there's an efficiency loss between producing calories that are grains and calories that are meat. There's an energy loss there. There's extra water. There are other impacts. There's more greenhouse gases. All of those dynamics will be things we have to consider as we plan out the decades ahead and the future after COVID. Additionally, as we think about the technologies that we will be using, although I know we're going to have a discussion probably and talk about very agricultural specific technologies, right? We think about hydroponics, we think about urban farming, we think about the use of drones in the field, we think about lab grown meat, we think about all kinds of other things that are going to change in food science and in agriculture. All of those things are going to change. But one of the most important things is sort of this, and I know this is like a buzzword bingo thing, right? This is kind of a game where you might expect someone to say all the things on this table. But the truth is, these are the general purpose technologies and scientific achievements that will greatly impact what happens in the future of agriculture. Being able to leverage data to make optimal decisions and eventually being able to lever quantum computing to optimize breeding, planting, distribution, all of the things to maximize yield, minimize waste. All of those things are going to happen, right? We're going to start with big data and use predictive analytics to try to drive insights. More of the data analysis piece will become critical in agriculture and farming, and not just in the supply chain, but out in the field. And of course, we're also going to see blockchain increasingly used for food safety. Again, thinking about knowing where your food has been, where it's going, who's had custody, chain of custody issues, surety, security, everything as we think about food security after COVID-19, blockchain is going to play a role in that, in the same way that contactless technologies very likely will as well. So as we think about what's going to happen, these general purpose technologies, and whether we're talking about IoT, where sensors are on everything and every animal and in every field, we expect that these will be applied in ways to boost yield, improve efficiency, reduce waste. That's where we think things will go here. And I know it seems strange to think that we're going to be deploying things like this is the quantum computer that Google's been developing, and it looks like the steampunk chandelier that you stick in liquid helium. But this is what we're going to be using. Just in the same way that all other industries have tried to advance using data, trying to drive towards insights, moving to having a culture of data. The same thing will be true on the software side for agriculture. And while we might think of the big changes as being hardware driven, and there will be big hardware changes, and material science driven, especially as we think about lab grown meats and other technologies, right? As we think about those two things, there's also the culture of data that will become increasingly critical as we look to the future of agriculture. Now, while some things change, some things will remain the same. And you know I'm an economist. So, I think that it's important to keep in mind when we think about financial markets, and this is true of agricultural markets, it'll also be true of energy markets as well, that two things drive markets. And I know you're looking at this and you're thinking back to some economics course you might have seen, and you're thinking, this is supply and demand. And I just want you to know that I'm disappointed. It's not supply and demand that drives markets, it's fear and greed. And this will always be the case. So that will remain the same, even if all the technologies change, which means we'll probably continue to see volatility in agricultural markets. And if there's a higher demand for goods, there will be pricing power to be had. And with that, I leave you with my standard disclaimer. And I'm very happy, again, to have been invited and very honored to be here today. Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to discussing these topics further.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schenker. 네, 쉔커 의장님의 강연 잘 들었습니다. 코로나 이후에 우리 사회가 어떻게 변할 것인지에 대해 사실 많은 의견들이 있는데 이 강연을 들으면서 경제, 교육, 일자리, 특히 농업에 대한 부분에 여러 가지 생각이 드는데요. 그래서 강연 이후에도 몇 가지 질문을 대담을 통해서 진행해 보고자 합니다. 네, 그럼 제가 쉔커 의장님과 김 교수님께 질문을 좀 드려보겠습니다. 먼저 쉔커 의장님, 앞서 강연에서 말씀해 주셨던 것과 같이 코로나19의 확산은 사회 다양한 분야에 이전과 완전히 다른 새로운 변화를 가지고 왔고 이제 다시 코로나 이전으로는 돌아갈 수 없다는 그러한 의견들이 굉장히 많습니다. 한국 역시 최근 대한민국의 대전환이라는 대명제를 가지고 포스트 팬데믹을 선제적으로 대응하는 준비에 박차를 가하고 있는데요. 이 준비의 중요한 부분이 그린 뉴 딜과 디지털 뉴 딜입니다. 아시겠지만 한국이 IT 강국이라고 알려져 있는데 포스트 코로나 전략으로 특히 한국의 농업 분야에 좀 더 포커스를 맞춰서 부가적으로 좀 설명을 부탁드려도 될까요?
Yes, thank you very much again for having me here and for the question. I think that as we look at how technology will be applied. I think that obviously the signal from the Korean government with the Green New Deal and with the Korean New Deal really puts a lot of money to applying new technology into advancing industries. And this is very important because if we think about that labor market chart and you see the percent of people working in agriculture going down, one of the critical issues for the Korean economy going forward is the age of people working in agriculture. So if you want to have the same yield, but the folks in Korean agriculture are older, looking forward, you won't just need people, you're going to need more technology to augment in case you don't have as many people working in the space. And again, I think that the most fundamental reality of what we've learned here is that even though everyone sort of thinks of agriculture and food in the back of their mind, there are real risks and things can happen to disrupt that supply chain, to present systemic risks, and being prepared for future risks and applying those technologies to augment a workforce that might decline because of technology, but also because of an aging sector of the workforce. That's really going to be fundamental to maintaining and increasing supplies and yields as we continue to see population and wealth rise in Korean households.
네, 좋은 의견이십니다. 말씀하신 바와 같이 한국 정부는 차세대 농업의 혁신 발판으로 스마트팜 등 혁신 기술 개발과 보급에 힘쓰고 있습니다. 제가 지금 소속되어 있는 키스트의 경우에도 제가 다른 정부 출연 연구소들과 함께 최근 몇 년 동안 한국형 스마트팜을 개발하기 위해서 어떠한 환경 제어 시스템이라든가 에너지 최적 관리 시스템, 또 생산 자동화 관리 시스템 등 기술 개발을 해서 고가의 외산을 대체할 수 있는 그러한 시스템을 개발한 적이 있습니다. 그래서 이러한 기술들이 우리나라의 농산업계의 기술 이전이 돼서 보다 우리 대한민국의 그 농업 스마트팜 기술을 한 단계 업그레이드 시킬 수 있는 그런 계기를 마련한 적이 있는데요. 네, 그럼 의장님 좀 더 연결해서 한 가지 더 여쭤보고 싶은 게 있습니다. 오늘 강연에서도 언급하셨다시피 특히 국가 필수 산업으로서의 농업의 중요성을 강조하셨어요. 사실 농업의 혁신이 매우 방대한 분야이다 보니까 다루는 분야가 굉장히 많은데 특히 우선순위를 두는 그러한 부분이 있다면 어떤 것이 있을까요?
Thank you very much for this question. Also, I think the first and foremost priority here is really going to be around security and surety of supply. So as we think about the different ways that we're seeing lots of technologies that can be applied, I think making sure that the agricultural and the food supply chain is secure, not just upstream at the farms, but that we also see across the material handling and e-commerce part of the economy. That's really important so that what the end user gets, we see as little wasted as possible in the supply chain, and that we have as much technology optimized in things that people don't need to do as possible. Obviously, in some agricultural areas, people need to be doing certain things that we don't necessarily have automated tools for. But for transport, for supply chain, for e-commerce, for all of those things, we can be leveraging automation to improve efficiency, reduce waste, and make sure we have a secure supply chain. So I think that's really important. I also think technologies like blockchain, which there's a lot of hype around, especially in the finance sector. And if I say blockchain, people think Bitcoin. I say Bitcoin, people think Lamborghinis. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an accounting record system where you have more transparency across counterparties showing where the goods are and where they've been. So I think those are going to be important. But as we think about uses in the field and farms, I think that finding the best that's out there now is where we're going to get some pretty big gains, I think, on yield and efficiency. And then looking at those bleeding edge technologies for the decade ahead. Right? So as you have noted, there's been a push to adopt and expand technologies, the best of what's already out there. But then we need to be scanning the horizon for technologies that are new that will probably be very impactful 10 years out. Again, things like lab-grown meat, hydroponics, these will continue to expand in their growth, but there might be, forgive the pun, low-hanging fruit that we can see in Korea and in any economy, an efficiency gain and an improvement of yield. And that's probably the best place to start is with what's already there, and then focus on planning to adopt what's coming.
말씀 잘 들었습니다. 저도 말씀을 듣다 보니까 저도 이제 연구직에 있다 보니 연구원 자체의 기술 인력 양성에 대한 고민도 되긴 하지만 더 근본적으로 농업의 지속 가능성, 농촌의 지속 가능성 이 부분을 인력 양성과 연결시켜서 생각해 보는 것도 중요한 것 같습니다. 이번 박람회가 단지 기술의 나열이 아니라 궁극적으로는 많은 사람들이 농업에 대한 이해를 하고 또 이러한 농업에 대한 시선이나 이해, 관심, 애정 이러한 것들이 예전과는 좀 달라지는 계기를 마련하기를 바라는데요. 이 부분은 김철규 교수님이 많은 관심과 연구를 해오신 걸로 알고 있는데 교수님의 의견을 좀 부탁드립니다.
네, 두 분 말씀을 통해서 사실은 많은 것을 배웠고 전적으로 공감하는 부분이 많이 있습니다. 사실은 모든 일이 그렇지만 사람이 굉장히 중요하다고 생각합니다. 가장 기본은 사람이라고 생각을 하는데요. 그래서 어떻게 사람들이 농업에 관심을 가지고 농업에 참여하는가 굉장히 중요하다고 생각이 듭니다. 특히 이제 미스터 쉔커의 강의를 통해서 필수 산업으로서의 농업 이 부분에 대해서 전적으로 공감을 하고요. 그래서 산업으로서의 농업도 중요하고 더 나아가서는 저는 사실은 한국 사회의 지속 가능성, 한국 사회가 그동안 경제적으로 많은 발전을 이뤘는데 그 과정에서 과잉 도시화, 그다음에 이제 뭐 고령화라든지 산업화 이런 것을 통한 여러 가지 부작용들도 경험하고 있는데요. 그런 맥락에서 보면 농업과 농촌이 제공할 수 있는 먹거리와 그 외에 다양한 사회 생태적 가치들이 한국 사회의 새로운 희망과 미래를 열어주는 굉장히 중요한 기회가 된다고 생각을 하고, 그런 의미에서 코로나 사태라고 하는 게 어떻게 보면 한국 사회 혹은 전 세계의 먹거리와 농업의 중요성, 아니면 프라이머리 인더스트리로서의 농업의 의미를 다시 부각시켰다고 생각을 합니다. 아까 주신 질문과 직접 관련되는 답변인데요. 사실은 그동안에 이제 지난 한 10년 동안 한국에서는 귀농, 귀촌, back to the farm 이런 운동들이 굉장히 이제 활발하게 진행이 되고 왔습니다. 그러니까 주로 이제 민간들의 자발적인 어떤 농촌으로의 이주이죠. 근데 그 외에 사실은 정부나 민간 단체들이 특히 이제 새로운 농업 기술을 좀 활용할 수 있는, 그래서 그렇다면 뭐 스마트팜 교육생 이런 프로그램을 통해서 다양한 청년층들에게 새로운 기술과 농업에 관한 다양한 지식을 전수하는 프로그램들을 지난 한 3년 동안 운영해 왔습니다. 그리고 중요한 어떤 것 중에 하나는 이 스마트팜 관련 교육과 관련해서 상당히 장기간 한 2년에 걸친 교육 프로그램인데, 최근 들어서는 특히 여성 농민들의 참여, 여성들의 농업에 대한, 스마트팜에 대한 관심이 높아졌다는 것, 이것이 좀 중요한 의미를 가진다고 생각을 합니다. 또 하나는 이제 소위 말하면 영농 청년 창업농 프로그램이 있어서 해마다 1,000명 이상, 올해 같은 경우는 한 1,600명 정도의 청년들에게 매달 한 100만 원 정도의 정착 지원을 해주면서 청년들이 농업을 배우고 혹은 농업을 자신의 어떤 직업으로 채택할 수 있도록 하는 그런 교육 프로그램들이 있습니다. 그래서 이런 정부에 의한 어떤 정책적인 개입과 더불어서 민간들, 귀농을 비롯한 혹은 청년 협업 농장과 같은 새로운 형태의 어떤 일자리 창출 및 생활 방식의 변화라고 하는 것이 아마 앞으로 더욱 중요한 의미를 가지게 된다고 생각을 합니다. 그리고 그것이 저는 궁극적으로는 농촌의 지속 가능성뿐만이 아니라 한국 사회 전체의 지속 가능성에 굉장히 중요한 의미를 가진 것으로 생각을 하고 있습니다.
네, 김 교수님께서 굉장히 중요한 말씀을 해주셨는데요. 농업을 바라보는 패러다임의 전환이 필요하다는 얘기, 또 한국인 전체 삶의 질을 향상시키기 위해서는 바로 농업, 농촌이 변해야 되고 이러한 관점의 변화가 지속 가능한 우리 사회를 가능하게 한다는 점, 이러한 것들을 강조해 주셨고요. 또 다양한 농업, 농촌의 인력 양성 프로그램에 대한 소개도 해 주셨습니다. 그러면은 혹시 교수님께서 쉔크 의장님께 혹시 질문이 있으시면 질문해 주시기 바랍니다.
예, 미스 쉔크 책을 제가 제 개인 돈으로 사서 봤습니다. 한국판 번역으로는 코로나 이후의 세계라고 이렇게 번역이 돼 있고요. 그래서 특히 농업 파트 마지막에 이제 뭐 먹거리의 중요성, 누구나 다 먹어야 된다 이런 말씀을 하셨는데 전적으로 공감을 합니다. 질문 두 가지 간단한 질문인데, 하나는 사실은 뉴스를 통해서도 봤고 책에서도 표현이 됐는데 농업 강국이고 식량 자급률이 100%를 넘는 미국에서 과일이라든지 채소라든지 달걀, 고기, 치즈 이런 다양한 신선식품들의 어떤 뭐 사재기라든지 혹은 뭐 실제 소비자들이 그런 것들을 접근하는데 굉장히 어려움이 있었던 것을 제가 알게 되었는데 어떻게 그럴 수가 있을까 이렇게 굉장히 궁금해서 전문가로서 그에 대한 어떤 설명, 왜냐하면 이제 한국에서는 사실은 코로나의 심각성에도 불구하고 먹거리 공급, 특히 시민 소비자 입장에서 먹거리를 접근하는데 전혀 어려움이 없었기 때문에 굉장히 궁금한 그런 부분이기 때문에 거기에 대한 답변을 좀 부탁을 드리겠습니다. 두 번째는 이제 그동안 어떻게 보면 자유무역이라고 하는 게 굉장히 중요한 어떤 패러다임이었다고 생각이 드는데 농산물이나 먹거리와 관련된 자유무역주의와 거기에 이제 대척점에 있는 지역, 로컬 푸드, 지역이라든지 아니면 어떻게 보면 국내 생산을 통한 국내 자급률을 높이는 국가 뭐 보호주의라고 할 수도 있겠죠. 그래서 자유무역주의와 보호무역주의 이런 것들이 앞으로 농업이나 먹거리와 관련해서 어떻게 전개될 것으로 예측하시는지 뭐 이런 데 대해서 의견을 좀 부탁드리겠습니다.
So let me start, if I may. Thank you for the question with the first one about supply chain topics and hoarding and these things. And then if we can talk about the trade, I would love to do that second. I hope that's okay. But thank you again. These are tremendous questions. So for the supply chain piece, the U.S. economy is quite large, and there is a lot of food, and we are a net exporter of many, many food products, and that's true. But we also had a supply chain that was set up to serve not just food at home, people buy in the grocery store, but to serve restaurants. And I think there really was bottlenecks where restaurants might have been getting the food, and yet people were no longer consuming as much at the restaurants. So it was really a mismatch as to where some of the supply was, because if you run a restaurant, you buy food in bulk and people come in all the time. The inflation data, the jobs data, the GDP report, they do reflect this dynamic that people bought a lot more at groceries and a lot fewer items in restaurants. Sorry, restaurants were closed. But the supply chain couldn't catch up quickly enough to redistribute the goods that would go to a restaurant into the retail supply chain. So this has something to do with bulk consumption, contracts, and kind of sticky supply chains. As far as hoarding goes, there's an old nursery rhyme. It's a tale you tell children and it rhymes. Old Mother Hubbard, she went to the cupboard to get her dog a bone, but the cupboard was bare, right? And so this is a nursery rhyme, but everyone's cupboard was bare, was empty before COVID-19. And suddenly you realize, wait a minute, there's food shortages in meat processing facilities in the United States. A lot of people we had COVID here in short volume numbers, a much greater degree than in Korea, some of which was an impact of the fact that we didn't have the MERS experience that Korea had back in 2015 to be able to respond and be more prepared. And so as a result of that, we saw shutdowns at meat plants, and then you couldn't get certain kinds of meat. It's not that you went to the supermarket and there was no food. It's just there wasn't much, or certain kinds of food you couldn't get. To your point about the second question about local and global, this is very interesting because I think it also ties in to your point about rural living and the ability for rural life and agriculture to heal people. Almost every single person I know planted fruits or vegetables or was doing something out of concern for food supply during the pandemic, even if it was just buying hanging tomatoes that on their back porch or something like this. Additionally, in the United States, we've seen the demand for and the prices of suburban and especially rural land go up since this happened for a couple reasons. One, people want to be closer to the food supply, to exactly your point. And number two, people can work remotely, they can get online education, and they realize they can have a remote life. And if they have a choice between a small condo that might be crowded with their whole family during a pandemic and a house with a yard or a farm, they would much rather have the house with a yard or a farm. And we are seeing that change in demand for real estate play out in many places. And I think that since we probably won't go back from many people for remote working or from remote education, that means there's actually opportunities for populations to be more sustainably distributed. And you might have smaller rural communities become a bit more vibrant and have more people there. As long as they have good internet access, there's nothing holding people from moving to more rural places and being closer to the food. I would also share another personal thought, if I may. Texas is also a net producer of food. I live in Texas. But my wife and I also made a list during the pandemic of what other states we would live in. And making sure those states had high degree of food exports was critical. And I think when people think in the future and they strategically plan where do they want to live, where do they want to work, having access to food, and of course, as we look 20, 30 years, even 10 years out, access to water will become much more critical decisions as people think, well, where else would I live other than here? I'd certainly like a little land. I'd also certainly like to be closer to food and not need to worry about that.
네, 의장님 말씀 잘 들었습니다. 그럼 여기서 김철규 교수님께서 농촌 관광에 대해서 추가 질문이 있으시다고 하는데요. 교수님 한번 질문해 주시죠.
Mr. Schenker, 그 일반적으로 사실은 이번 코로나 사태로 인해서 관광 산업이 굉장히 큰 피해를 보고 있는 것을 우리가 관찰을 하고 있는데요. 또 특히 이제 한국에서는 아마 다른 나라도 마찬가지겠지만 농촌 관광 혹은 팜스테이 이런 부분이 좀 중요한 부분, 농민들에 있어서는 몇몇 농민들에 있어서는 굉장히 중요한 어떤 수입원이었는데 코로나로 인해서 아주 심각한 타격을 받고 있습니다. 그래서 그런 얘기를 제가 농민들로부터 직접 들었는데 관련해서 중장기적으로 저 농촌 관광이나 팜스테이 어떤 전망 이런 것들에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지 하나 하고 또 당장 즉각적으로 이런 새로운 환경 속에서 농촌 관광업에 종사하는 농민들은 어떻게 이런 데 대응할 수 있을지 이 두 가지 질문을 답을 좀 해주시면 대단히 감사하겠습니다.
Excellent question. Thank you, Professor Kim. I think that this shows some significant differences between Korea and the United States. In the United States, our biggest tourist destinations are Las Vegas, New Orleans, Orlando, Florida, right? Like New York City. These places were shut down significantly or to a great degree, and tourists didn't want to go to these crowded places. Surprisingly, though, I know a lot of people, and anyone I'm friends with on social media, I see where they go. All my friends, they tell me where they go. They are going out to farmlands. They are going out to small rural areas because they want to go where no one else is. Or, you know, I mean, a lot of people are doing it and there's a lot more farmland, but they don't want to go somewhere where there's population density. They don't want to go to a theme park and be crowded with a lot of people. They're very happy to go into the mountains and stay in a little town, or to go out into the farmlands and stay somewhere quite secluded and remote and far away from many people. And that's really interesting. If you look at New York City, for example, a lot of people who live there, they're traveling or moved out into farmlands and countryside. So it's interesting to hear that in Korea that has gone down, because in the United States, and I know here the COVID-19 virus is still, I think, a much bigger problem than it is in Korea at this point. The tourism for exactly that kind of destination, a farmland, rural, kind of secluded, that's exactly what people want. Related to this dynamic of farming and technology and thinking about what comes next, I would be very interested to hear, Dr. No, if you might be willing to share a little bit more about the development of smart farm technology and where things are going, and what you see for the future of farming and agriculture in Korea.
Okay. 사실 시간상 오늘의 마지막 질문이었는데 제가 대답을 드리게 됐네요. 질문 감사드립니다. 현재 한국의 스마트팜 보급 현황을 좀 말씀드리면, 한국 내에 스마트팜 보급 현황은 20%밖에 되지 않습니다. 그래서 좀 더 향후에 한국의 기후 환경과 작물에 적합한 한국형 스마트팜 기술 개발이 시급하고요. 이러한 것들이 좀 더 농가 보급에 좀 더 확장되었으면 하는 바람입니다. 사실 얼마 전에 전국 경제인 연합회에서 발표한 내용을 보면 코로나 이후에 가장 유망할 것 같은 전망되는 산업 4위에 기존 농업의 ICT를 접목한 스마트팜 산업 분야가 선정이 된 바가 있는데요. 코로나로 인해서 그 외국인 노동자들 유입이 좀 어려워지고, 또 세계 각국이 자국의 식량 안보를 중요시하면서 산업적인 가능성이 커지고 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 실제로 한국 정부는 내년 2021년부터 7년 동안 농림축산식품부, 과학기술정통부, 농촌진흥청 이 세 개의 부처가 합동으로 3,800억 원의 예산을 투입해서 스마트팜 다부처 패키지 혁신 기술 개발 사업에 착수할 예정이고요. 이것을 통해서, 이러한 국가적 대형 사업을 통해서 한국의 스마트팜 기술이 좀 혁신이 되고, 이것을 통해서 농산업계의 경쟁력을 제고하고 또 농가 수익 증대, 거기에 기여할 것이라고 예상을 하고 있습니다. 네, 오늘 대담 어떠셨나요? 오늘 앞선 강연에서 제이슨 쉔커 의장은 전 세계적으로 불어닥친 팬데믹의 영향으로 사회, 경제 및 환경적인 변화에 대한 이야기로 시작해서 실제 농업과 농촌에 코로나가 미친 영향, 그리고 우리는 이것을 어떻게 대응해야 하는지에 대한 이야기를 나눠봤습니다. 경제적인 침체를 맞이하고도 이커머스 시장의 성장이라는 새로운 국면을 보았고, 이는 로봇 등을 포함한 새로운 가능성을 예측할 수 있는 시간이었습니다. 이는 농업에도 유사하게 적용이 될 수 있을 거라고 보고 있는데요. 미국 내 농업 생산과 유통의 변화뿐 아니라 한국의 경우도 마찬가지로 미래에는 빅데이터를 통해 농업 생산과 재배의 큰 변화와 가능성을 가지고 올 것을 이야기했습니다. 쉔커 의장은 디지털 뉴딜 전략에 부합하는 다양한 로봇, 인공지능 등을 적용하는 한국의 농업 전략에 기대를 보였습니다. 농업 인력 육성에 대한 중요성도 함께 살펴보았습니다. 김철규 교수님은 현재 한국 정부가 지원하는 다양한 청년 창업 농업 지원 사업에 대한 설명도 해주시면서 새로운 농업 창업의 가능성을 이야기해 주셨습니다. 그리고 마지막으로 농업 혁신 전략 중에 하나인 스마트팜 관련 이야기도 함께 나누어 보았습니다. 현재 우리나라의 20%밖에 되지 않는 스마트팜의 보급률을 더 높일 수 있도록 정부 부처와 산학연 협동 프로젝트들에 대한 필요성과 계획에 대해서 함께 이야기했습니다. 네, 오늘 벌써 약속한 시간이 다 됐는데요. 사실 농업의 미래, 농업에 대해서 이야기를 하자면 정말 오늘 하루 종일 다양한 문화를 하나하나 짚어서 얘기를 해야 되지만 시간 관계상 여기서 맞춰야 될 것 같은데요. 이번 2020 대한민국 농업박람회는 김철규 교수님께서 계속 강조를 해주셨던 것처럼 사고의 전환, 패러다임을 바꾸는 대한민국을 지속 가능하게 하는 농업, 농촌을 위한 다양한 기술과 지원에 대한 볼거리, 이야기거리 이러한 것들이 있습니다. 그래서 여러분의 많은 관심을 부탁드리고요. 오늘 이 자리에 멀리서 화상으로 함께해 주신 제이슨 쉔커 퓨처리스트 인스티튜트 의장님 그리고 고려대 사회학과 김철규 교수님 진심으로 감사드립니다. 땡큐. 저는 키스트의 노주원 단장이었고요. 여러분 경청해 주셔서 감사드립니다.